I give the floor to the representatives of Russian Federation.
Thank you, President. I would also like to apologize because I might need slightly more than 5 minutes because today's topic is so important and we do have a few things to say about it. Distinguished colleagues, I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that we, all of us here, as well as other delegations to the Conference of States Parties to the OPCW, are essentially attending the last stage of a spectacle directed by our Western colleagues and staged in The Hague. In 2 weeks, the 25th session of the Conference of States Parties will continue its work. And for yet another month, an unprecedented decision will be railroaded through to strip the Syrian Arab Republic of its rights within the organization. This draft is submitted to the Conference of State Parties, which, in violation of the Chemical Convention norms, without it being examined by the Executive Council. Here we're talking about denying Syria the right to participate and vote in the Conference of States Parties and the Executive Council, to be elected to its membership, and also to hold any type of activities on its territory that would be linked to the conference, to the Executive Council, and to subsidiary structures. I'll say this directly. The choreographed nature of this whole scheme was clear from the very beginning. This was a play in several acts. From the beginning, the Technical Secretariat, in violation of many years of norms and practice at the OPCW, mainly the principles of consensus, created an illegitimate group for a investigation and identification team. This team, scornful of the principles of how to actually carry out an investigation, including the so-called chain of custody, produced a report replete with factual and technical errors, whereby the Syrian authorities are accused of using chemical weapons on 2 occasions. This report was roundly criticized by independent experts. We provided our detailed argumentation on this and disseminated it to the Security Council and the UN General Assembly as early as June of last year. However, the Technical Secretariat remain deaf to this criticism. This likely shows that before the grand theatrical finale of the IIT will serve us another surprise, reporting back on yet another pseudo-investigation with accusations against the Syrian authorities in its conclusions. We have no doubt about this at all. Nor do we have the doubts the fact that our Western colleagues will rush to present this, yet another unscrupulous product or document, as yet further proof of Damascus's alleged use of chemical weapons. I'd like to disappoint you. This will only mean that your methods to demonize Damascus without any convincing or trustworthy proof remain as they were before, and won't win you any points. And as if by chance, referring to the political bias report of the IIT that I mentioned earlier, last summer, Western delegations railroaded through an impossible ultimatum against Syria to the Executive Council of the OPCW to declare chemical weapons and production facilities that they simply do not possess. It is clear that it is impossible to fulfill this ultimatum. And further, technical issues. The Director General alleges that Syria is in non-compliance with the decision of the Executive Council, And now the Conference of States Parties is proposed to punish Damascus and to strip it of its rights within the organization. This whole time, the Syrian authorities, despite the colossal pressure on them and the monstrous accusations against them made by Western colleagues, and the blatant manipulation on the side of the OPCW Technical Secretariat, not even to mention the extraordinary circumstances linked to the pandemic, they still continue to work with the organization. Today's report, this report of the Director General is further confirmation of this. I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that in paragraphs 11 and 12, we're talking about February's consultations between the mission to assess the initial declaration of Syria and the Syrian body responsible for this, during which there were also visits to facilities and meetings with Syrian experts, and questions were asked. The Syrian side provided its explanation as regard the so-called unanswered questions. Unfortunately, in response, once again, Syria heard that its initial declaration was incomplete, and so on. But it remains true that the dialogue is ongoing. And there is progress in cooperation between the Syrian Arab Republic and the OPCW, including on the issues from the initial declaration. All of this is against a backdrop that, as what we have seen from the report of the organization's Director General during the March session of the Executive Council, in the context of the pandemic, practically all inspection activity of the OPCW has ground to a halt. For example, a visit to delegation of the Executive Council to the US, say, has been already postponed twice, and at the end, and now it is only planned to be held in 2022. Visits were only held to 5 states who said that they had old munitions there. Syria is now hardly the only country where the Technical Secretariat is supporting a relatively regular dialogue. So which one of these is then the main violator, as our Western colleagues try to present the situation as being? I call on you all to think. If you deprive Syria of its right to participate in decisions made within the organization, what is the point for Damascus to continue working with them at all? At the end of the day, the task is to wear Syria down, as was done with Iraq, after the Secretary of State of the US personally brought fakes into the walls of the UN about the presence of weapons of mass destruction in that country, or trying to achieve that there is no chemical weapons in anyone's hands on Syrian territory. I'd like to take this opportunity, the fact that today our meeting of the Council has quite a broad audience. I will call on all delegations, both here and in The Hague, to demonstrate have a responsible approach and vote against this draft decision, which poses a real threat to undermine the authority of the OPCW and the UN Security Council alongside it, because the Security Council are responsible for the fulfillment of Resolution 2118. We cannot allow the OPCW or any other specialized platform to become an instrument to punish the undesirables through unjustified accusations of the use of weapons of mass destruction. Any other state could be in Syria's position, where Western colleagues decide to exert pressure on them, using the chemical issue as a leverage. Speaking against speaking out against depriving Syria of its rights at the OPCW, you are speaking out against double standards, and you are defending a fair world order where there is no place for the diktat of force. All states must be equal in the context of complying with international law. I'd like to underscore that Russia, as a responsible member state of the OPCW, categorically condemns the use of chemical weapons by whomever, wherever, and for whatever purposes. We are keen to get to the bottom of what happened. We and our Syria colleagues have a lot of facts that point to the use or the attempted use of chemical weapons by the so-called Syrian opposition. And as the UN Secretariat knows full well, Damascus shared these facts with the OPCW. However, to establish the truth, it is vital that the Technical Secretariat of that organisation does its job and impartially oversee the fulfilment of by states of the provisions of the Chemical Weapons Convention. And then we can look forward to a professional and impartial investigation. At the same time, we cannot provide artificially high requirements for some countries, and at the same time, in similar situations, close your eyes and ignore questions as regards the shortcomings of other states, and ignore questions that arise in this context pertaining to non-state actors. This impartial work, we're still very far away from achieving such impartial work done on the part of the Technical Secretariat of the OPCW. Moreover, there's evidence of direct manipulation and internal violations within the Technical Secretariat as regards the chemical file in Syria, and this has already reached a critical mass. Here we see blatant violations when investigating the incidents in Khan Sheikhoun in April 2017 and in Duma in April 2018, as well as testimonies from former staff of the OPCW about direct manipulation of conclusions from the fact-finding mission under pressure from Western countries, as well as a practice of repression and intimidation of free thinkers who refused to participate in this masquerade. I won't list all of these facts again. We spoke about them in detail in previous statements. In December last year, we submitted a list of questions on this account to the Director General of the OPCW, Fernando Arias. And we have not received a single response to any of them, not during our meeting or after. Our Western colleagues love to speak about the importance of transparency within the OPCW, and they laud the Technical Secretariat leadership for complying with this principle. I would like to ask, where is this transparency? When the specific questions are asked by member states, and they are also raised in The Hague, but again and again, Ms. Nakamitsu has to answer them rather than the head of the specialized structure. With every day, there are more and more questions, and not only states are asking them. A very recent example was a communication to the Director General from a group of major public figures, which was published on the 8th of February by the famous NGO Courage Foundation, whereby the Technical Secretariat leadership is called upon to finally get to the bottom of the numerous violations carried out in its work, including information about manipulation when preparing reports on what happened in Duma. We call on the Technical Secretariat to respond to this in public, because silence and insufficient responses only strengthen suspicions that the Technical Secretariat has something to hide. The fact that Mr. Arias is clearly hiding behind Ms. Nakamitsu does nothing to add to the authority of the OPCW in the light of the accusations that I mentioned earlier. President, I will anticipate the traditional accusations against us in attempts to erode and undermine the authorities of the OPCW from our Western colleagues. There are no justifications behind them. Russia, on the other hand, is fighting to renew the good name of this organization and is trying to hear from the leadership of this organization responses to questions that are of concern to us all. The Security Council cannot allow itself to simply stand by and watch how, because of politicization, one of the pillars of non-proliferation of weapons of mass destruction is being destroyed. The fight to re-establish trust in the OPCW and to strengthen its authority. This is our common goal, and we trust that we will have support from the other members of the Council on this, including in the context of response to the new anticipated political slant of the IIT that I mentioned earlier. And also the upcoming vote in The Hague and all the other pernicious steps taken to fight against the spread of WMDs, which could follow. If Syria is not the foe, then it could be anyone who's against a real destruction of chemical weapons across its whole territory, then to achieve its political goals. If that's the case, then we have difficult times ahead. This does not bode well for the OPCW, and nor for international cooperation in this and in other critically important spheres. Thank you for your attention.